The scissors glinted under the harsh cafeteria lights as Dylan Matthews held them inches from Amara Thompson's face. His quarterback hands steady, with cruel precision. "Time to fix this nappy mess," he sneered, while his teammates formed a wall around them, blocking any escape routes for the quiet black girl who had dared to exist in their elite prep school. What Dylan and his crew didn't know was that in exactly 24 hours, they would be on their knees in that same cafeteria, tears streaming down their faces as they begged for mercy from the girl they thought was just another helpless victim. Amara Thompson moved through the halls of Preston Academy, like a shadow, her presence barely registering on the radar of the privileged students who populated the elite private school. At 16, she was one of only 12 black students in a sea of 800. Her scholarship, the only reason she could walk these marble corridors that whispered of old money and older prejudices. She kept her natural hair in long, carefully maintained locks that fell past her shoulders, each strand a connection to her grandmother, who had taught her the sacred ritual of hair care before passing away 2 years ago. The library was her sanctuary, a place where the weight of being constantly watched seemed to lift slightly. She would tuck herself into the furthest corner, surrounded by towering shelves of leather-bound books, and lose herself in worlds where being different wasn't a daily battle. Her grades were impeccable, her conduct beyond reproach, and her strategy simple: remain invisible, graduate with honors, and escape to a college where she could finally breathe. Dylan Matthews ruled Preston Academy with the casual arrogance of someone who had never heard the word no. 6'3", with the kind of all-American looks that graced recruitment posters. He was the son of a federal judge and a pharmaceutical heiress. His father had donated a new sports complex to the school, ensuring Dylan's position as untouchable royalty. He moved through the halls, flanked by his loyal pack: Connor Reed, whose father owned half the commercial real estate in the city; Marcus Chen, the mayor's son who used his minority status as a shield while participating in the torment of others; and Jake Sullivan, whose family's law firm had gotten numerous Preston students out of serious legal trouble. The four of them had perfected the art of terrorizing anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of belonging. They were smart enough to keep their harassment just below the threshold of expulsion, careful to maintain plausible deniability while making life hell for their chosen targets. Teachers looked the other way, administrators found excuses, and victims learned that speaking up only made things worse. Amara had successfully avoided their attention for nearly 2 years by following a careful routine. She arrived at school exactly 15 minutes before first period, took routes through less populated hallways, ate lunch in the library, and left immediately after her last class. She never lingered, never drew attention, never gave them a reason to notice her. It was exhausting, but it was survival. The first crack in her carefully constructed invisibility came on a Thursday morning in November. Amara was rushing to her AP chemistry class, having stayed too long in the library, researching for her history paper. The hallway was crowded with students moving between periods, and she was forced to take the main corridor instead of her usual circuitous route. She was almost to the science wing when it happened. "Watch where you're going." Dylan's voice cut through the hallway chatter as Amara accidentally brushed past him while navigating the crowd. She hadn't even seen him standing there, holding court with his friends near the trophy case that displayed his numerous athletic achievements. "I'm sorry," Amara said quietly, attempting to continue on her way, but Connor stepped into her path, blocking her escape. "Sorry?" Connor mocked, his voice dripping with false concern. "Did you hear that? D? She's sorry for getting her ghetto germs on you." The hallway seemed to pause, students slowing their pace to watch the unfolding drama. Amara felt the familiar heat of humiliation creeping up her neck, but she kept her expression neutral, her eyes downcast. "Don't engage," she told herself. "Don't give them anything to work with." Dylan made a show of brushing off his Letterman jacket where Amara had touched him. "I'm going to need to get this dry cleaned now," he said loudly, playing to their growing audience. "Do you people even know what dry cleaning is?" "Probably not," Marcus chimed in, the irony of his participation lost on no one except himself. "They usually just spray everything with that cheap perfume to cover up the smell." Amara's hands clenched into fists at her sides, but she forced them to relax. She had learned long ago that anger was a luxury she couldn't afford. "May I go to class now?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Jake laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the lockers. Listen to her trying to sound all proper. Like using big words changes what you are. And what am I? The words slipped out before Amara could stop them. Months of suppressed frustration, momentarily breaking through her careful control. Dylan's eyes lit up with predatory interest. This was new. The quiet girl was talking back. You really want me to answer that? He asked. Stepping closer, in front of all these people, Amara immediately recognized her mistake. She had given them an opening, shown a flash of defiance that marked her as interesting rather than invisible. No, she said quickly, lowering her gaze again. I just want to go to class. See? That's your problem. Dylan continued, clearly enjoying himself now. You think you belong in the same classes as us? Like that scholarship makes you equal. He reached out suddenly, grabbing one of her locks between his fingers. What even is this? Looks like rope. Amara jerked it away instinctively, her heart pounding. No one touched her hair. No one. It was sacred. Personal. A connection to her ancestors and her identity. But Dylan's hand followed, grabbing more firmly this time. Don't touch me, she said, her voice sharper than intended. Or what? Connor laughed. You'll get your cousins from the hood to come handle us? The bell rang, signaling the start of the next period. But nobody moved. The crowd of students had grown, phones appearing in hands as they sensed something worth recording was about to happen. I bet it's fake anyway, Dylan said, tugging on her locks hard enough to make Amara wince. Probably glued in like all that weave you people wear. Please let go, Amara said through gritted teeth. She could feel years of careful control beginning to crack. The mask of invisibility slipping. I don't think I will, Dylan replied, his grip tightening. In fact, I think this whole situation needs some improvement. Don't you guys think she'd look better with a more appropriate hairstyle? His friends murmured their agreement, closing in to form a tighter circle around Amara. The crowd of onlookers pressed closer, but no one intervened. This was Preston Academy's ugly truth laid bare. When Dylan Matthews decided to destroy someone, everyone else just watched. Tomorrow, Dylan announced, finally releasing her hair with a sharp tug that brought tears to Amara's eyes. The courtyard. Lunchtime. We're going to give you a makeover you'll never forget. He walked away with his pack, leaving Amara standing in the now emptying hallway, her hands shaking as she tried to smooth down her locks. Several students avoided eye contact as they hurried past, unwilling to be associated with Dylan's latest target. Others whispered among themselves, already spreading word of tomorrow's entertainment. Amara made it to the girls' bathroom before the tears came. She locked herself in a stall and cried silently, her body shaking with suppressed sobs. 2 years of careful invisibility, destroyed in a moment of accidental contact. She knew what was coming. She had seen Dylan's makeovers before. The Indian girl whose long braid had been cut off, the Latino boy whose hair had been spray-painted blonde, the Asian girl whose bangs had been chopped into a mockery of style. Each incident recorded, shared, laughed about for weeks afterward. But this was different. Her locks weren't just hair. They were her history, her culture, her connection to the grandmother who had spent hours teaching her how to care for them. Nana's gentle hands sectioning her hair, applying the oils and butters passed down through generations, telling stories of their ancestors with each twist and turn. Your hair is your crown, baby girl, Nana had said, her weathered hands working with practiced precision. Don't let nobody make you feel shame about your crown. Amara touched her locks gently, remembering she had started growing them when she was 8, right after her mother got the job that would eventually lead to the scholarship at Preston. 8 years of growth, of care, of love woven into each strand. The thought of Dylan's hands on them again, of scissors cutting through years of dedication, made her stomach turn. That evening, Amara sat at the dinner table, pushing food around her plate while her mother, Denise, talked about her day at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. Her father, Robert, was away on another business trip, trying to build his consulting firm into something that could support them without relying on Amara's scholarship. You're key tonight, baby, Denise observed, studying her daughter with the keen eye of someone who had learned to read the subtle signs of distress. Everything okay at school? Amara wanted to tell her, wanted to explain about Dylan and his threats, about the constant weight of being one of the few black faces in a sea of white privilege. But what could her mother do? March into Preston Academy and demand justice? That would only make things worse. The school would close ranks. Dylan's father would make some calls. And Amara would be the scholarship kid who couldn't handle the pressure. Her future, everything her parents had sacrificed for, would be gone. Just tired. Amara lied, forcing a smile. Big chemistry test tomorrow. Denise didn't look convinced. But she knew better than to push. She had her own memories of being the only black nurse on her floor, of the subtle and not-so-subtle ways her colleagues had tried to break her. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right?" she said softly. "I know, Mom." Amara escaped to her room as soon as she could, closing the door and leaning against it. Her walls were covered with vision boards, pictures of Howard University, Spelman College, anywhere but here. Just make it to graduation, she told herself. Just survive. She sat at her desk and tried to focus on homework, but her mind kept drifting to tomorrow. Maybe Dylan would forget. Maybe something else would capture his attention. Maybe. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She opened it to find a picture of herself from that morning. Caught mid-step in the hallway, someone had photoshopped scissors around her locks, with the caption, "Makeover time, don't be late." More texts followed from different numbers. The image was already spreading through the Preston Academy social network. By tomorrow, everyone would be waiting, watching, ready to witness her humiliation. Amara turned off her phone and climbed into bed, pulling the covers over her head like she used to when she was little and scared of thunderstorms. But this storm wouldn't pass by morning. Friday dawned gray and cold, matching Amara's mood as she stood before her mirror. She had considered staying home sick, but that would only delay the inevitable and mark her as weak. Dylan would just find another opportunity, probably with interest added for making him wait. No, better to face it head on and hope that satisfaction would make him move on to another target. She dressed carefully in her usual understated style, khakis, a simple button-down shirt, and a cardigan. Nothing that would draw additional attention. Her fingers hesitated over her hair, running through the locks one last time. She had stayed up past midnight caring for them, as if extra attention could somehow protect them from what was coming. The morning passed in a blur of classes where Amara couldn't concentrate on anything but the ticking clock. Teachers droned on about equations and essays while she sat rigid in her seat, hyper-aware of every whisper, every glance in her direction. Word had clearly spread. She could feel the anticipation building in the school like electricity before a storm. At 11:45, 15 minutes before lunch, Amara made her decision. She wouldn't go to the courtyard. She would hide in the library, or the nurse's office, or anywhere but where Dylan expected her to be. It wasn't brave, but survival rarely was. She was heading toward the library when Marcus appeared at the end of the hallway, casual as if he just happened to be there. Amara turned to go the other way, only to find Jake blocking that exit. They had thought of everything. "Going somewhere?" Marcus asked, his smile sharp as broken glass. "Dylan's waiting for you." Wouldn't want to disappoint him. They escorted her like prisoner guards, one on each side, through hallways that seemed both endless and far too short. Students pressed against lockers to watch them pass, phones already out and recording. Amara kept her head high, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her fear. The courtyard was packed. It seemed like half the school had gathered, forming a large circle in the center of the outdoor space. Dylan stood in the middle like a gladiator in an arena, basking in the attention. Connor was beside him, and in his hand, Amara's heart stopped. They weren't regular scissors. They were professional hair shears, the kind used in salons. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. They had planned this, prepared for it, turned her degradation into an event. "There she is," Dylan announced as Amara was pushed into the circle. "Our guest of honor." The crowd cheered and jeered in equal measure, hungry for the spectacle. "Please," Amara said quietly, hating herself for begging, but unable to stop. "Please don't do this." Dylan's smile widened. "But you need help. I mean, look at this mess." He reached for her locks again, and this time Amara couldn't dodge in the enclosed space. "This isn't appropriate for Preston Academy. We have standards here." "Standards?" Amara found herself saying, surprising even herself. Is that what you call this? See? There's that attitude again. Connor interjected, moving behind her. That's what happens when you let them think they belong here. The crowd was chanting now, cut it, cut it, cut it. The sound crashed over Amara in waves. Each repetition, another blow to her dignity. She looked around desperately for a teacher, an administrator, anyone who might stop this, but the few adults she could see were carefully looking away. Dylan grabbed a handful of her locks, lifting them for the crowd to see. Should we start here? The scissors glinted as he opened them, positioning them around the base of several locks. Or maybe here? He moved to another section, drawing out the torture. Amara closed her eyes, unable to watch. She thought of her grandmother, of the strength of the women who came before her, of all the dignity they had maintained in the face of far worse than this. A strange calm settled over her. Do it then, she said, opening her eyes and looking directly at Dylan. But know that you're not just cutting hair. You're cutting away pieces of my history, my culture, my identity. And for what? Because you're so insecure in your own privilege that you need to destroy others to feel powerful? Dylan's face darkened at being challenged so directly. Big words from scholarship trash, he snarled, and brought the scissors down in one vicious cut. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden silence of the courtyard. Several of Amara's locks fell to the ground, and she felt as if a piece of her soul went with them. The crowd had gone quiet, perhaps finally realizing they were witnessing something more than just a prank. But Dylan wasn't satisfied with just one cut. He grabbed another section, then another, hacking away with increasing violence. Amara stood perfectly still, tears streaming down her face, but her expression remaining defiant. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of crying out, of begging, of breaking completely. Connor and Jake held her arms when she instinctively tried to protect her head, while Marcus filmed everything on his phone, making sure to capture every angle of her humiliation. The cutting seemed to go on forever. Each snip of the scissors, another violation, another theft. When Dylan finally stepped back, breathing hard as if he'd run a race, Amara's beautiful locks lay scattered on the ground like fallen soldiers. What remained on her head was a choppy, uneven disaster, patches of different lengths that bore no resemblance to any intentional style. There, Dylan said, tossing the scissors to Connor. Much better. Now you look like what you really are. The crowd began to disperse. The show over. Their entertainment quota filled. Some looked ashamed now that the mob mentality was fading, but most were already uploading videos, adding filters and captions to maximize likes and shares. Amara stood alone in the center of the courtyard. Surrounded by the remnants of her hair, she knelt slowly, gathering the cut locks with shaking hands. Each one represented months or years of growth, of care, of love. She couldn't leave them here to be swept up with the trash. Amara? A voice broke through her focus. She looked up to see Miss Shen, one of the few teachers of color at Preston, standing at the edge of the courtyard. The woman's face was a mask of controlled fury. Come with me. Amara followed numbly, clutching her severed locks to her chest. Behind them, Dylan's laughter rang out one more time. See you Monday. Scholarship girl, if you come back. Miss. Chen led her to an empty classroom, closing the door firmly behind them. Sit, she said gently, guiding Amara to a chair. Let me see. She examined the damage with professional detachment, though Amara could see her hands shaking slightly. Those animals, she whispered. Then louder, why didn't you report the threats yesterday? What would have been the point? Amara asked, her voice hollow. His father plays golf with the headmaster. His mother is on the board of trustees. I'm just the scholarship kid who should be grateful to be here. Miss. Chen's face hardened. No. No. You are a brilliant young woman who earned your place here through merit, not money. And what happened today? She took a deep breath. This crosses every line. This was assault. It was just hair, Amara said. Though the words felt like ash in her mouth, we both know it was never just hair. Miss. Chen replied firmly. I'm calling your mother. And then we're going to the administration. This ends now. But Amara was already shaking her head. Please don't. It'll just make everything worse. They'll close ranks, find excuses, maybe even revoke my scholarship for causing trouble. I just want to go home. Miss. Chen looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Amara's expression stopped her. At least let me drive you. You shouldn't be alone right now. The ride home was silent, except for Amara's occasional muffled sobs. Miss, Chen kept glancing over, clearly wanting to say something comforting, but knowing there were no words that could fix this. When they pulled up to Amara's modest apartment building, so different from the mansions most Preston students called home, Miss, Chen finally spoke. This isn't over, she said firmly. I know you don't want to fight right now, and I respect that, but when you're ready, I'll be here. We'll make them pay for this. Amara nodded, not trusting her voice, and fled into the building. She made it to her apartment and inside before completely breaking down, sliding down the door and sobbing on the floor. The severed locks scattered around her, each one a reminder of what had been stolen. She was still there when her mother came home early. Having received a call from the school about an incident, Denise took one look at her daughter, and her professional composure shattered. Oh, baby, she breathed, dropping to the floor beside Amara and pulling her into a fierce embrace. What did they do to you? Through broken sobs, Amara told her everything, not just about today, but about the months of microaggressions, the constant feeling of not belonging, the weight of being one of the only black faces in a sea of privilege. Denise listened, her own tears falling silently as she held her daughter. I wanted to be strong, Amara whispered. I wanted to prove I belonged there, but maybe they're right. Maybe I don't. Denise pulled back, cupping Amara's face in her hands. Now you listen to me, she said, her voice fierce with maternal protectiveness. You belong anywhere you choose to be. What those boys did wasn't about you. It was about their own hatred and insecurity. And baby, we are not going to let them get away with this. But Mom, his father, I don't care if his father is the president himself. Denise interrupted. They assaulted you. They targeted you because of your race. That's a hate crime. And I will burn that whole school down before I let them sweep this under the rug. For the first time since the scissors had touched her hair, Amara felt a spark of something other than despair. Her mother's anger was righteous, cleansing, like a cool drink after walking in the desert. But first, Denise said, her voice gentling, let's see what we can do about your hair. I know someone who might be able to help. That evening found them in the apartment of Miss Williams, an elderly woman from their church who had been styling black hair for over 50 years. She examined the damage with expert eyes, tutting and shaking her head. Lord have mercy, she muttered. What kind of devils would do this to a child? She looked up at Amara with kind eyes. But don't you worry, sweetheart. Hair grows back. And in the meantime, we're going to make you look like the queen you are. For the next 3 hours, Mrs. Williams worked her magic. She evened out what was left, shaped it into something intentional rather than chaotic. When she was done, Amara looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Her hair was short now, very short, but styled in a way that emphasized her cheekbones and made her eyes seem larger. More striking. Different isn't bad, Mrs. Williams said, standing behind her. Sometimes different is just the beginning of becoming who you're meant to be. That night, Amara lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her hand unconsciously reaching for locks that were no longer there. Her phone had been buzzing nonstop with notifications, but she had turned it off, unable to face whatever cruelty was being spread about her online. In the darkness, she made a decision. Dylan Matthews and his crew thought they had broken her. They thought she would slink away, transfer schools, disappear. They counted on her staying quiet, staying weak, staying in what they considered her place. They were wrong. Saturday morning arrived with a sense of purpose Amara hadn't felt in years. She woke early, did her shortened hair routine, and dressed in her most professional outfit. Her mother was already up, on the phone with someone, her expression serious. Yes, I understand, Denise was saying. Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. We'll be there. She hung up and turned to Amara. That was a civil rights attorney, a friend of a friend who specializes in discrimination cases against educational institutions. She's very interested in what happened to you. Amara nodded, feeling both nervous and determined. What about Dad? He's flying back tonight, Denise said. He wanted to come immediately, but I told him to finish his meeting first. We're going to need the money for what comes next. They spent the weekend preparing. The attorney, Miss Rodriguez, came to their apartment Saturday afternoon with a legal pad and a recorder. She took Amara's statement in exhaustive detail, asking for names, dates, and any evidence of previous incidents. The video evidence will be crucial. Miss? Rodriguez explained. I'm sure multiple students recorded what happened. We'll subpoena those recordings if necessary. She looked at Amara seriously. I need you to understand something. If we pursue this, it will get ugly. The school will try to protect itself, and those boys, their families will hire expensive lawyers. They'll try to destroy your reputation, claim you're exaggerating, or that it was just a prank gone too far. Are you prepared for that? Amara thought of her severed locks, now carefully preserved in a box in her room. She thought of Dylan's sneering face, of the crowd chanting for her humiliation, of every moment she had shrunk herself to fit into their narrow view of acceptability. I'm prepared, she said firmly. Miss. Rodriguez smiled. Good. Because what they did to you isn't just assault. Given the racial dynamics and the targeted nature of the attack on your culturally significant hairstyle, we have grounds for a hate crime enhancement. The school's failure to prevent this, despite knowing about the threat, also opens them to significant liability. Sunday was for gathering allies. Miss. Chen called, offering to provide a written statement about what she had witnessed and the administration's pattern of ignoring harassment. Several other students, emboldened by Amara's parents' obvious intention to fight back, reached out with their own stories of Dylan's bullying. A picture emerged of systematic harassment that the school had willfully ignored, but the biggest surprise came Sunday evening. Amara was helping her mother prepare dinner when the doorbell rang. She opened it to find a white girl from her AP history class, Sarah Mitchell, standing nervously in the hallway. Hi, Sarah said awkwardly. I know we've never really talked, but I was there on Friday, in the courtyard, and she pulled out her phone. I recorded everything, multiple angles. I've been sick about it all weekend. What they did to you was horrible, and I should have tried to stop it instead of just filming. Amara stared at her, speechless. Sarah was part of the popular crowd, not Dylan's inner circle, but definitely adjacent. For her to come forward, why? Amara finally asked. Sarah bit her lip. Because it was wrong. Because I've watched Dylan torment people for 3 years and never said anything. Because, she took a deep breath, because my little sister just got accepted to Preston for next year, and she's adopted. She's black. And I realized if I don't stand up now, it could be her next. Amara felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. There are others, Sarah said quickly. Other kids who are tired of Dylan running the school like his personal kingdom. If you fight this, really fight it, you won't be alone. After Sarah left, Amara sat with her parents at the dinner table, a new determination filling her. I want to go to school tomorrow, she announced. Her parents exchanged worried glances. Are you sure, baby? Her father asked. He had arrived home that afternoon, his face cycling through various shades of fury as he learned what had happened. I'm sure, Amara said. They think they broke me. They think I'll hide. But I'm done hiding. I'm done shrinking myself. They want to see the angry black girl they've created in their minds? Fine. But they're going to see her standing tall, unbroken, and unafraid. Monday morning arrived like a reckoning. Amara stood before her mirror, adjusting her outfit one final time. She had chosen carefully, a sharp blazer over a crisp white shirt. Professional but not trying too hard. Her shortened hair was styled perfectly, every strand in place. She looked older somehow, as if the events of Friday had aged her in ways that had nothing to do with time. You sure about this? Her mother asked for the 10th time, hovering anxiously by the door. We could wait. Go straight to the meeting with the administration. No, Amara said firmly. I need to do this. I need them to see that they didn't break me. The drive to school was quiet, her father's hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. They had wanted to walk her in, but Amara had refused. This was something she needed to do alone. As she approached Preston Academy's imposing entrance, Amara could feel the shift in atmosphere. Students who would normally ignore her were staring openly, whispering behind their hands. She kept her head high, her stride confident, refusing to show the anxiety churning in her stomach. The hallways seemed to part before her like the Red Sea. Conversations died as she passed, replaced by a buzzing tension. Everyone had seen the videos. Everyone knew what had happened. But no one expected to see her back so soon, and certainly not looking like this. Polished. Professional. unbowed. Is that Amara? Oh my God. She actually came back. She looks different. Dylan is going to flip. The whispers followed her to her locker, where she found Sarah Mitchell waiting with a small group of students. Some Amara recognized as quiet kids like herself. Others were surprising additions from more popular circles. We wanted you to know you're not alone. Sarah said simply, what happened on Friday was wrong, and we're done being silent about it. Before Amara could respond, a commotion erupted down the hall. Dylan Matthews had arrived, flanked by his usual crew, laughing about something on Connor's phone. He hadn't seen her yet, too absorbed in his own world to notice the tension in the hallway. Then Marcus nudged him, pointing in Amara's direction. Dylan's laughter died as he took in the scene. Amara surrounded by supporters, looking nothing like the broken girl he'd left in the courtyard. His face darkened as he strode toward them, his pack following like obedient dogs. The hallway held its collective breath, waiting for the confrontation. Well, Dylan said, stopping a few feet away. Look who decided to show her face. Nice haircut. Very appropriate for someone of your background. Amara stepped forward, away from her protective circle. Thank you, she said calmly. I think it suits me better than the alternative you provided. Dylan's jaw clenched at her composed response. This wasn't the script. She was supposed to be cowering, traumatized, defeated. You've got some nerve coming back here, Connor interjected, trying to regain control of the situation. After Friday, you should know your place. Oh, I know my place, Amara replied, her voice carrying clearly through the silent hallway. My place is right here, as a student of Preston Academy, a student whose parents pay tuition just like yours, who earns grades better than yours, and who has every right to exist without being assaulted. Assaulted? Jake scoffed. It was just a haircut. Stop being so dramatic. Is that what you're going to tell the police? Amara asked conversationally. That it was just a haircut? I'm sure they'll be very interested in your interpretation of assault laws. The color drained from Dylan's face. You wouldn't dare, wouldn't I? Amara pulled out her phone, showing them an email. This is from my attorney. We're meeting with the administration and she checked the time. 23 minutes. Would you like me to tell them you'd prefer to handle this through the legal system instead? You little Dylan stepped forward aggressively, but suddenly found his path blocked. Sarah Mitchell had moved to stand beside Amara, followed by several other students, then more, students who had been silent witnesses, who had laughed along to avoid becoming targets themselves, were choosing sides. Back off. Dylan, Sarah said firmly, you've done enough. Dylan looked around, realizing that the power dynamic had shifted. The fear that had kept everyone in line was cracking, and Amara's defiance was spreading like wildfire. This isn't over, he snarled, but the threat lacked its usual weight. You're right, Amara agreed. It's just beginning. See, Dylan, you made a crucial mistake on Friday. You thought cutting my hair would humiliate me into silence, but you just gave me freedom. Freedom from trying to fit into your narrow worldview, freedom from caring what you think, and most importantly, freedom to fight back. The bell rang, but nobody moved. The entire hallway was frozen in this moment, witnessing the fall of a tyrant and the rise of something new. Principal Morrison's voice crackled over the intercom, unusually tense. Dylan Matthews, Connor Reed, Marcus Chen, and Jake Sullivan. Report to the administration office immediately. Amara Thompson, please come to conference room A. The boys exchanged panicked looks. This wasn't the usual summons to the principal's office for a slap on the wrist. This was formal, serious. As Dylan turned to leave, Amara called out one more time. Oh, and Dylan? My attorney wanted me to remind you that destroying evidence is a crime, so I'd be careful about deleting any videos from Friday if I were you. He stormed off without responding, his crew trailing behind, like their tails were between their legs. The hallway erupted in whispers and exclamations as soon as they were gone. Amara felt a hand on her shoulder. Miss Chen had appeared, pride evident in her expression. Ready for this? She asked. I've been ready since Friday, Amara replied. Conference room A was packed. Her parents were there, of course. Along with Miss Rodriguez and her legal team, Principal Morrison sat at the head of the table looking deeply uncomfortable, flanked by the school's lawyer and several members of the Board of Trustees. The boys' parents had also been called, and Judge Matthews looked particularly displeased at being pulled from his courtroom. Let's get straight to the point. Miss Rodriguez began, sliding a folder across the table. On Friday, November 15th, 4 students of this institution committed assault with racial bias against my client. The attack was premeditated, filmed, and witnessed by dozens of students and at least one faculty member. The evidence is overwhelming and indisputable. Now wait just a minute. Judge Matthews interjected. Assault is a very serious accusation. From what I understand, this was a schoolyard prank that got out of hand. A prank? Amara's father spoke for the first time, his voice deadly quiet. They held my daughter down and cut off her locks. Hair that took 8 years to grow. Hair that represents her cultural identity and heritage. If someone held down your son and carved off pieces of his identity, would you call it a prank? Miss Rodriguez opened her folder, revealing printed screenshots from various social media posts. These are from your son's Instagram. Judge Matthews posted Thursday night. I quote, "Time to give the scholarship girl a makeover she'll never forget. #know your place." The judge's face reddened as he looked at the evidence. Principal Morrison cleared his throat nervously. Surely we can handle this internally. Preston Academy has procedures for dealing with student conflicts. Your procedures failed, Denise Thompson said sharply. Multiple students have now come forward with stories of harassment by these boys that were reported and ignored. You've created an environment where students like my daughter are systematically targeted while perpetrators face no consequences. What do you want? The school's lawyer asked bluntly. Miss Rodriguez smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Justice. The immediate expulsion of all 4 boys involved in the assault, a public acknowledgement of the school's failure to protect its students, implementation of mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all students and staff, and compensation for the emotional trauma and cultural violence inflicted on my client. Expulsion? Connor's mother gasped. But they're seniors. This will ruin their college prospects. They should have thought of that before they committed a hate crime. Miss Rodriguez replied coolly, unless, of course, you'd prefer we skip this meeting and go straight to the police station. I'm sure the media would be very interested in how Preston Academy handles racial violence. The room erupted in arguments, threats, and negotiations. Through it all, Amara sat quietly, her hand clasped in her mother's. She had said her piece in the hallway. Now it was time for the adults to handle the legal battles, but as she watched Dylan's father bluster and threaten, as she saw the school administrators scramble to protect their reputation, as she witnessed the slow realization dawning on everyone's faces that this couldn't be swept under the rug, Amara felt something she hadn't experienced in her 2 years at Preston Academy. Power. Not the false power that came from money or connections or intimidation. Real power. The power that came from standing up, speaking truth, and refusing to be silenced. The meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, the boys' parents had agreed to voluntary withdrawal to avoid expulsion and criminal charges. The school committed to a comprehensive review of its disciplinary procedures and the implementation of new anti-bullying measures. There would be a settlement, the details confidential but substantial enough to ensure Amara could attend any college she chose without financial worry. As they prepared to leave, Judge Matthews approached Amara and her parents. He looked older somehow, diminished. I owe you an apology, he said stiffly. I failed as a parent. What my son did was inexcusable. He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. I hope you can find it in yourself to forgive him someday. Amara met his eyes steadily. Forgiveness will come when he truly understands what he did and why it was wrong. Not because he faced consequences, but because he genuinely comprehends the harm he caused. The judge nodded and walked away. His shoulders bowed with the weight of his son's actions. That afternoon, Amara returned to a very different Preston Academy. News of the boys' withdrawal had spread like wildfire. The hallways buzzed with a mixture of shock, excitement, and for some, fear. The power structure that had seemed so permanent had crumbled in a single morning. As Amara walked to her locker, she noticed something remarkable happening. Students who had been victims of Dylan's crew were walking taller, speaking louder, taking up space they had previously been denied. The culture of fear was breaking down, replaced by something new and uncertain, but undeniably better. Amara! Sarah Mitchell caught up with her, slightly out of breath. Did you hear? Marcus Chen just posted a public apology on Instagram. He admitted to everything and said he's entering counseling to deal with his own internalized racism. Amara raised an eyebrow. One sincere apology out of 4 wasn't much. But it was something, and get this, Sarah continued, a bunch of us are starting a diversity committee. Real change. Not just the performative stuff the school usually does. We want you to be part of it. For the first time in days. Amara felt herself truly smile. I'd like that. As the day wore on, the full impact of what had happened began to sink in. Preston Academy, the institution that had sheltered and enabled bullies for generations, was being forced to reckon with its culture. Teachers who had looked the other way were being questioned. Students who had participated in or witnessed harassment were being called to account. But for Amara, the most powerful moment came at the end of the day. As she prepared to leave, she passed the courtyard where everything had happened. The maintenance crew had long since cleaned up the physical evidence, but she could still see it in her mind's eye, her locks scattered on the ground, the jeering crowd, the scissors flashing in the sun. She paused at the entrance, then walked deliberately to the center of the courtyard. A few students noticed and stopped to watch, then more. Soon, dozens of students had gathered, the same audience that had witnessed her humiliation. But this time, they weren't there to watch her fall. They were there to see her stand. Amara looked around at the faces, some friendly, some neutral, some still processing the shift in their world. She thought about making a speech, about using this moment for some grand gesture, but in the end, she simply stood there, whole and unbroken, despite their best efforts to destroy her. Then she turned and walked away, leaving Preston Academy's courtyard behind, but carrying with her the knowledge that she had changed it forever. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of adjustment. Without Dylan's crew terrorizing the hallways, Preston Academy slowly began to transform. The diversity committee that Sarah had mentioned became a real force for change, organizing workshops, bringing in speakers, and creating safe spaces for marginalized students. Amara found herself at the center of this transformation. Though she tried to deflect attention to the collective effort, her short hair had grown into a style she loved, a daily reminder that beauty and strength could emerge from trauma. There were still challenges. Of course, some students resented the changes, muttering about political correctness and reverse discrimination. Some teachers struggled to adapt to a new reality where they couldn't ignore harassment. But the tide had turned, and there was no going back. One evening, about a month after the incident, Amara was studying in her room when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but she answered anyway. Hello, Amara, this is Dylan Matthews. Amara's blood ran cold. Her finger hovered over the end call button, but curiosity won out. What do you want? I wanted to apologize. His voice was different, stripped of its usual arrogance. I know it doesn't mean much now, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. Not just because I got caught, or because I'm facing consequences. I'm sorry because what I did was wrong. Amara was silent for a long moment. Why should I believe you? You shouldn't? Dylan admitted. I've given you no reason to, but I've been seeing a therapist trying to understand why I became the person I was, why I needed to hurt others to feel powerful. He paused. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve that. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I took from you wasn't just hair. It was safety, dignity, identity, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be better than the person who did that. Amara listened to his breathing on the other end of the line, processing his words. I appreciate the apology, she said finally, but Dylan, this isn't about words. If you really understand what you did, then you need to do the work. Not just therapy for yourself, but actual work to dismantle the systems that allowed you to terrorize people for years. I know, he said quietly. I'm trying. I'm volunteering at a community center in the city, working with kids who've been bullied, trying to use my story as a warning. It's not enough, but it's a start. After they hung up, Amara sat in the gathering darkness of her room, thinking, she didn't forgive Dylan. That would take time, if it ever came at all. But she recognized that change was possible, even for those who seemed irredeemable. Her mother knocked and entered, taking in Amara's thoughtful expression. Everything okay, baby? Dylan called. Amara said, to apologize. Denise's face hardened. And? And I think he might actually mean it. Amara looked up at her mother. Does that make me weak? That I'm willing to believe people can change? Denise sat on the bed beside her daughter, pulling her into a hug. No, baby, that makes you strong. The weak thing would be to let hatred consume you. The strong thing is to leave room for growth while still protecting yourself. As senior year progressed, Amara found herself becoming someone she had never expected to be, a leader. Not through seeking power or position, but through the simple act of refusing to be diminished. Students sought her advice. Teachers requested her input on new policies, and colleges recruited her not just for her excellent grades, but for her demonstrated courage and leadership. The girl who had once tried to be invisible had become impossible to ignore, but on her own terms, and warriors, as Amara had learned, don't beg for respect. They command it